Hello everybody, welcome back. Little speedboat there. I'm going to meet my daughter here at the island where we're going to go swimming. No, not swimming. She's out here at the beach. But on the way out, I thought, maybe I would make a video. And because I've been going through the physics and all, and I think I'll cover a little bit. I'm listening. See, it's pretty here. I always want to do a video out by the channel, this Packer channel. I'm going through some of the courses from a university professor that I've had these courses for a while. Now, they're good courses on physics, and I want to just share a few ideas, some things we've been talking about. Say, John, you're not a physicist. No, that's correct. So nothing you'd say on that subject. But I do study apologetics. Apologetics comes from the word in Peter, to give a defense for the faith. And that's where that term comes from. And it's Christians who defend the view of God, and it includes doing physics, science, to the degree that some people make false arguments. And this particular professor that I'm studying right now through my CDs, compact discs, I listened to the course before, and he's a good man. And he doesn't sound anti-God at all. But I remember that later on in the course, through the CDs, he will say that he's basically not a believer. And he brings that up because he's probably, I forget what he's talking about exactly, but this fits into that field. Now, even though I'm right at the beginning of the course, and this is to hopefully teach something. He's mentioned a couple of times already, early on in the course, he says, because of the great breakthroughs, physics, the study of science in the physical realm, I think it was Aristotle that was called really the first scientist, about 300 years before the time of Christ. Because though he's considered one of the great philosophers, you had Socrates, Plato, and then you had Aristotle. Aristotle was the most famous student of Plato. But Aristotle's school, he started like a competing school, because Plato, who was his instructor, passed him up a couple of times. Plato's school was, I believe, Plato's was the academy, and Aristotle's was the Lyceum. Okay? If I got the two schools right. The actual schools they started teaching philosophy in Greece. So, right from those days, you had science and philosophy and how we explain things. Now, some of the critics over time, and this particular professor I'm studying under now, I'll grant him, he also majors and teaches philosophy. He says this a couple of times in the course. So he's got the right, I guess, to talk philosophy and physics, though this course is physics. But every now and then he'll make a criticism, mild, but he'll say, unless you have the old Aristotelian, meaning Aristotle, mindset that man and the earth are special, and he's kind of mocks it in this way, that the original thinkers, you have physics, what's called modern physics, or some call it classical physics, but you have physics from the time of Newton all the way up until the beginning of the 20th century. And then you had a whole new modern field, okay? Sometimes they use different names. I've heard people use different names for these. But you had the study of the physical things, science and study of physical, all the way back to the time even before Aristotle. But during the time of Isaac Newton, who I talked about, you had really great breakthroughs. And then you had Einstein. Well, those who said they believed that man and the earth and all that we see, those who said We study science from the viewpoint that this is a unique experiment or creation. Early on, that was the view. This is, look at all the wonders that we have around us. Now, this philosophy teacher, and later on physics teacher, later on those who deny God, like Stephen Hawking and others, some would begin to say, if you take that old Aristotelian view, meaning that we humans, the earth, and what we know in our existence here, if you take the view that we're unique or special, they'll say that's just like a Christian view or a deist or theist view, those who believe in God. And we now know, some say, that really the earth and humans are really not special. Okay. Now this is where the philosophy skewed, in my view, the mind of my physics teacher, professor, to see these. Because what he said, which was true, that Einstein's great breakthroughs in the relativity in the 20th century, it showed us that physics, gravity, the things that we do know, it works the same no matter where you are. For instance, if you're in an airplane and you're eating peanuts and drinking your drink, even if the plane's going, 700 miles an hour, you'll notice that you don't have to make up for the speed of that plane and the peanuts falling your way once you're in flight. You say, if you open a window, though, well, yes, you got wind resistance and all. But this professor's correct. Einstein and the breakthroughs in physics did show us that really everything works the same, even if you were and this teacher said, so even if we went to the farthest galaxy and we were somehow able to it'd have to be a controlled environment. See, this is where he's missing it, because you don't have the atmosphere where life can exist like you do on this planet, which is really the Aristotelian view, meaning we are still special. But what he was saying was, now that we know that the universe is so vast, you see, when Einstein had his great breakthrough, and he said there was a beginning point, which most of us refer to as the Big Bang. Simply, there was a beginning point. They call it the point of singularity. Einstein also had a problem, because if everything started at one point and things were going outward, he thought surely there'd have to be a slowing down of that. See, as of now, Einstein understood that everything started at a beginning point and was going. And so, but what he didn't have was any way he could show that things were beginning to slow down, because to him, it couldn't keep expanding forever. So he added a little formula, just added it, and he called it the cosmological constant, okay? He just added a mathematical formula that said, my theory of relativity, and we got to have this in here because obviously things can't keep going without ever stopping. But Hubble, who we get the Hubble telescope from, he actually, through observations, did see that no, not only were things not slowing down, but they were speeding up. And Einstein called that his greatest mistake, adding that little thing in there. Now, I threw some of that in. Now, from my viewpoint, from the Christian apologists who argue for the uniqueness of man in creation, my physicist teacher says, because we now know that the laws work the same even in the farthest galaxy, and he gave some examples. You can go to the furthest, now he's correct in this, but you can go to the farthest galaxy and it still remains the same. You could go, and if there were other universes, you can go there. And he said, and he's making statements like this on the teaching. He says, therefore, we're not like in the Stone Age, where we think man and the planet Earth are unique. He said, no, we're just nothing. We're just one little blip in this vast universe. Now, see, now what you're getting, I'm giving you a little example here. That's his philosophy, which later on the course he'll say he does not believe in God. That's his philosophy interpreting the data. That's not really science there. Why, John? The more that we realize that the universe was so much greater than we initially believed, we thought early on we're certainly going to find life on other planets. But not only did we not find life on other planets, which a lot of people thought we would, we also did not find the unique conditions of life, the distance of the sun. You know, there are other suns, but the distance from the sun to Earth is so perfect. We began discovering that there was so many exact measurements for this planet and for man to survive. They could not figure out how all of this, why is it that way? You see, that's what science shows. So my point would be, we are certainly unique, and the planet is unique, and man is unique, because no matter how far, in the example of my physicist teacher, no matter how far you can go, the laws, yes, he's right, the laws work the same of physics. But why is there no other unique experiment or creation like this? Now, I'm using the same data that he would use, and I'm not challenging his data. But it's the worldview. You see what I'm saying? It's what you believe that sometimes affects how you interpret data. And that's what you have in a lot of the science, a lot of the physics. And it's an interesting field, and I enjoy it, and it's fun. But this is what I want you to see. Science today shows us there's really no logical explanation for why everything worked out the way it did for this planet and for human beings to be here. The sun could be just a little further and everything would be frozen. We wouldn't make it. A little closer, everything would be burnt up. And that's just one. There's no explanation for that. And why do we not have the same thing? And some say, no, we found a planet or we found a place where it's possible. But the fact is, we don't find life on other planets. We don't find and the vastness that we now know is out there. So to me, it is unique, and that is the Christian view. And without doing too much, when I was doing that, going through that Fabric of the Cosmos documentary, which is PBS, Alan Guth is a good man, professor physicist from MIT. Okay, and Guth, it showed something interesting because he's very famous today for what's called the idea of inflation, okay? And it showed how he developed it. And basically, if you'd made it in a simple, if you said everything started from one little point, which we call the Big Bang, he had a different take on it. He said, no, actually, there was negative gravity at that point, and he referred to it as inflation. If you look at his idea, it's just different words to explain that there was one point where there was nothing, and everything from that point started. And so whether you call it that or not, but he explained, he said, when he first came up with the idea, and he gave a little like biography of it, he said he started speaking about it, and then other physicists, scientists would attend his lectures, and then it became like the newest thing, maybe in a way. And then it caught on, and more people were interested. And I almost saw like it was more like a popularity then. And when I looked at his, I've looked at his theory before, and there might be some little differences from what we understand. But if you said everything, which we do know, everything had a point where it started. You can do Alan Guth's theory or call it the Big Bang. It's not really a big difference. But what I want you to see is, even as I'm listening to these courses, the physicist is saying some of the old-time thinkers, me, others that would believe, yes, creation and earth and mankind are real unique, because in Scripture, that's exactly what's taught, that God made everything, but man was unique. He made man in the image of God. I was thinking of the parable of the sower of the seeds, because in some of this debate, which I was saying I thought Einstein would be vindicated, and he was just this week, even though it was talking about something different, but he was vindicated. And in the little argument they were saying, in subatomic particles and quantum physics, there's these particles that seem like they act without any rhyme or reason. That was the debate, okay? And Einstein simply said, look, if we keep studying, which is science, we're going to see there's a cause for this effect. That's cause and effect. And Niels Bohr on the other side, which is the most predominant view today in quantum physics, was there really was no order. Things just, there's at the fundamental level of existence, there's really no order. That's not true, because even the modern quantum physicists who say there's no order, they will now say, the way we explain it, my hand is giving me trouble, they'll now say the way we explain it is, it was just probability. There was a certain amount of subatomic particles that act a certain way, and some might not act correct, but over time, enough do what's right, and there is order. I think that in itself is a vindication of Einstein. That some things, everything is not particularly directed exactly the way it's supposed to be, because we have, even in human beings, people sometimes are born with deformities, and there's a result of what we call the curse on the planet, the curse from the original sin. And everything is not perfect as it should be, but yet as we study things, we still see, if you want, a remnant of order to things. And so I think he, even in that little program I'm watching, he's vindicated in a way. But what I thought about was the parable of the sower, and I've thought of this before. Jesus said, famous parable, he said, when somebody goes to plant seeds, he said some seeds, they fall by the wayside. They don't even make it into the ground. Others, they land on rocky land, and the birds eat them. And some make it into soil where there's, a lot of weeds. But some make it. 1 out of 4, actually, out of all the ones that person that's throwing seeds, 1 out of 4 make it. And I like that, because even in your life, there's a process of things that you'll do that don't amount to anything. And if you were a perfectionist and said, no, I want all of the seeds to make it, you'd never make it. You got to understand that those aspects of things that you thought might have been valuable, and you spent time throwing those other seeds, and they didn't make it, but it's part of the process. It's part of the process. And in a little way, as I'm looking at this whole argument of design, we call it the argument of teleology, meaning there's design in things. It doesn't mean there are some things that go astray. It doesn't mean that there's some things that we can't explain the order to, because that's also part of what happened in our creation. God made everything perfect, and the thorns and all the things, Scripture says, the bad stuff later became as part of the curse on earth. So I would just say to those, and these are some thoughts that were going through my head, and in a practical way, I would just say, in your life, there's going to be stuff. And maybe some of that stuff, that time you spent throwing the seeds that never made it, that was still part of the process. That was still part of the process. And if you're progressing in life or ministry or whatever it is, and you say, no, John, I want to master it in such a way that none of it will be wasted, I would say no. Part of the process is there's going to be things. Jesus said in John 15, I am the vine, you are the branches. But every branch in me that does not bear fruit, he takes it away. But every branch that bears fruit, he purges it. He cuts things off that it may bring forth more fruit. And I'm just telling you that's part of the process. There's stuff that God is going to have to prune from us, okay? Takes those things away. And that's part of it. So I had those little thoughts. I'm going to go meet my daughter. She's right out here by the ocean. But I wanted to share them, being we're talking on it. So I bless you guys. The Lord bless you and keep you. Let's see, do I have a verse about, there's many scriptures about water, the ocean. I'm doing the Red Sea, teaching a little bit of Moses in some of these videos. The knowledge of the glory of the Lord is going to cover the earth as the waters cover the sea.